So I'm going to invite Thea up to help me with a little demonstration to get us started this morning. So I grew up doing summer stock theater. And so my parents would teach classes, and I would have to go to the acting classes. And one of the things they taught is, and they do this in the secular world, in business as well, they teach you how to be a team and how to trust. And so this is a trust exercise. Thea is just going to fall back and trust that I'm going to catch her. Thank you, youth director. All right. Do you trust me, Thea? I didn't say go yet, but I was here. I would have caught you. All right. Do you trust me? All right. You ready? Go. Okay. Well, you're not supposed to step back. I had you. Let's try that again. No, you did great. You ready? I'm right here, babe. All right, go. You didn't do that when we practiced. One more time. No stepping. I got you. This is how much Thea trusts her mommy, I guess. This is insight into my home. All right, now, go ahead. There. See, I got you. Part of that exercise is you have to be confident that the person behind you is going to catch you. You have to be willing to fall and trust, knowing that you're going to be caught. That is the way that we're going to define prayer this morning. That we define prayer that even as we talk about unanswered prayer, to have the trust and the confidence to fall back knowing that God is the one that's going to catch us. And so Ron is going to read for us this morning the 1 John chapter 5, verses 14 to 15. There you go. I think you're ready.
I'm new at this.
Well, and anything technology has gone wrong this morning, so.
We're confident that he hears us whenever we ask for anything that pleases him. And since we know he hears us when we make our requests, we also know that he will give us what we ask for.
So this is the ending to the first letter of John. We believe these were written by the same writer of the Gospel of John. And John finishes this letter really in verse 13 or 12, depending on which scholars you read. And then the rest is what's called a postscript. We believe John added it just a little later. And it would be like our version today when you write a letter, you have a PS. Oops, forgot to say this. And he wants to sum up, and he talks about how we go to God and who we are, and he talks about prayer. And he says, he starts in verse 14, we are confident that he hears us. We are confident that God hears us. That's that trust, that's confidence to fall back knowing that God is there waiting to catch us. But interestingly, the Greek word for confidence also includes a connotation of freedom of speech. It was used to describe democracies that would be freedom of speech where you could say anything without repercussion or penalty. And that's another amazing way to define prayer. That we have the confidence to fall back and trust in God, and we can say anything we want to God, that freedom of speech, where there won't be repercussions or penalties or consequences. So this is the final week of our sermon series on prayer. Week 1, we talked about and defined what is prayer. Last week, we talked about the tools of prayer, and we spent some time in different prayer activities. So today, we come to the understanding of what is unanswered prayer. And even as we do that, it's important to set the foundation again, that we have confidence. We can go to God, we can fall into God's arms, and we can say anything, and God is there. So first we learn that prayer is action. It's going to God. It's falling back into God's arms. It's willing to say anything we want. It's a faithful step to go to God. And then we're going to learn about how to embody prayer, how it becomes a part of our lives. So there's a joke. Someone asks a small boy, "Do you pray?" And he says, "Well, sometimes I pray, and sometimes I just say my prayers." We can all acknowledge that, right? Like if you watch Blue Buds, every week at the end of the episode, they'll sit down and say, "Bless us this, O Lord, for these thy gifts." Is it just reciting, or is it embodying and praying? It's easy to kind of just sit down and do something, but to embody the prayer where everything connects. Now, I don't mean to take away from reciting prayers, because we talked last week that there are important places to have prayers that are memorized. Even taking that time before a meal to say, "Bless us for these thy gifts," is setting aside time. Having prayers memorized for those times when we have no words, when we're at the end of our rope, or we're just too exhausted, to recite a memorized prayer and know that we have fallen back into God's arms. And then when things are going well, or we know we're in tune, to embody prayer and to allow it to seep into every aspect of our lives, the everyday action. And so John goes on to write in verse 14, "We are confident that he hears us whenever we ask for anything that pleases him." Now that's a very important phrase. We are confident he hears us whenever we ask for anything that pleases him. It's very easy to get caught in the idea that God is the genie in the bottle, that if you make 3 wishes, right? And boomers, I know you love my throwback image today. Or we also think, oh, it's like a letter to Santa Claus. If we write what we want, then it'll all appear. Yet John says, whenever we ask for anything that pleases him. It reminds me of the words of the prophet Mick Jagger, if you're a Rolling Stones fan. Just kidding. But you can't always get what you want. You could try sometimes, I hear you. You just might get what you need. And see, it's that aligning our prayers with God's prayers. Whenever we ask for anything that pleases him. In prayer, we are changed. And it becomes more about God and embodying the very words that Jesus taught us. Thy will be done, not mine. And so in prayer, we align our will with God's will. Whenever we ask for anything that pleases him. As we align our will with God's, it doesn't mean that we can't ask for what we want. Jesus experienced this on his very last night. he took the disciples to Gethsemane and he said, "Please stay awake and keep watch over me as I pray." And he went and he prayed and he said, "Let this pass from me." And then he went back and he found his disciples sleeping. And he woke them up and he said, "Keep watch, I'm going to pray." And he went off and he prayed and he said, "Is there no other way?" And he went back, and they're sleeping yet again. And he has to wake them up. And then he goes and he prays a third time. And I read this in a devotional this week that so struck me. What if, in that moment of the third time, catching the disciples sleeping, he realized that his prayer was being answered in another way? That in their sleeping, he realized, and in our sleeping and falling asleep, that it was necessary for him to go to the cross to save us. And at Gethsemane, Jesus always ended that prayer, "Yet I want your will be done, not my will." We may ask for anything. Yet John this morning is reminding us that God's answer may be very different. The devotional struck me this week that, wow, Jesus got his answer in the sleeping and the sinfulness that was right in front of him to remind him why he would walk to the cross and to the empty tomb that week. See, God answers. God answers prayer. For us, the question becomes, are you listening? Because our answers can sometimes come in very different ways than the answer that we are wanting or looking for. In discovering the disciples sleeping over and over again, Jesus got his answer and he continued to pray, "Yet not my will, but yours." God speaks in his time, not ours. God speaks when we truly listen. Not listen for our answer, right? But truly listen. Laura Story wrote the song Blessings, and the chorus is, "'Cause what if your blessings come through raindrops? What if your healing comes through tears? What if 1,000 sleepless nights is what it takes to know you're near?" I had the privilege in about February of 2014 to hear Laura's story on stage. And before she sang this, one of her most famous songs that she has written and performed, she told this story. So this was 14, and she said that in 2011, she had been married for 2 years, and her husband was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And he had to have, young couple, and had to have brain surgery. And the doctor told her beforehand that most likely he would come out of surgery and not remember the past few years. And she said in that time, this song began to form. And he had the surgery and he woke up. And she said, "Do you know who I am?" And he said, "Yes, you're Laura Story." But it just kind of went like that. And she had to say, "Do you know we're married?" And he didn't. He didn't remember that, but he said, "Yes." But that story could have gone very differently. And in the midst of all that, she writes, "What if 1,000 sleepless nights are what it takes to know you're near?" God speaks, and yet it's often not in the way that we want at first, but what we know we need. So I shared that I heard this story told in 2014. I'm not one to go to concerts, and I think that it was a Casting Crowns concert, and Laura Story was the opening act. And it was, I think, I'm embarrassed to say this as your pastor, it was my very first Christian concert. It could have been my only one. The youth want me to go to Zateo. But it was February of 2014. The backstory for us at that time is that my husband stopped working and was unable to work on December 31st, 2013 was the last day he was able to serve as a pastor. And we took that step, not knowing what was going on, and our prayers were very particular and very not what we wanted God to say, what God was saying. And a friend said, let's go to this concert. And I was like, okay. And so the three of us went, and Laura Story shared her story. And if you're unaware, my husband has a liver disease, but the symptoms are neurological disorders, and it presents as traumatic brain injury. And he became symptomatic as I was pregnant. And in January of 2014, we found ourselves, I'm the sole working parent. I have an 18-month-old, a sick husband, no prospect of Social Security or an extra income. And Laura Story gets up, shares her personal testimony, and begins to sing the song Blessings. After the song was over, I immediately tweeted at her and I said, thank you. God spoke to me tonight with the words I needed to hear, and share just a little bit, as much as you can, in 140 characters on Twitter. And as soon as she got off stage, she tweeted right back, keep the faith, keep praying, you will see his blessings. God answers. It becomes for us to listen. Now, fortunately, I was at a concert, so it was like God actually hit me with a 2x4 because Laura's telling her story and I had to listen, right? And that's the way God has to work with me. And yet, God speaks in our difficult times, in our highs and in our lows. God is always there. It's for us to walk through the difficult, to listen, to come out on the other side, and still be in prayer, to trust and know that he is our Emmanuel, God with us. And so for those of you who like the teaching notes, I realize I skipped over one, but here's the one. When we truly pray, we change our prayers. Simply being in his presence and listening changes the prayers. We went from that concert, and life didn't get easier immediately, and yet we had the confidence and the hope to know that God was listening and speaking. May we all have that same confidence and hear those signs of God speaking in our lives.